The world is not louder because there are too many voices. It is chaotic because too many minds are pulled away from themselves. Every morning, when you open your eyes, worries are already waiting at the door. News, expectations, fears, comparisons, and demands you never agreed to carry. They enter your mind before you have time to breathe. Many people believe peace will arrive when the world finally calms down. Yet a Stoic elder once understood something most forget. The world does not become quiet. The mind learns how to remain still within it. Imagine a middle-aged man wearing a worn brown cloak, walking slowly along a narrow stone path in the mountains. The sky is heavy, the wind sharp, thunder rolling in the distance. Yet his steps are unhurried, his gaze steady. He carries a rule that protects him from inner collapse. Not everything that happens deserves a place inside your soul. When you try to control the storm, you exhaust yourself. When you learn to stand firm within the storm, you gain freedom. Stoicism does not promise an easy life. It teaches a stable one. In a chaotic world, the peaceful person is not the one who escapes, but the one who chooses wisely, chooses which thoughts to entertain, which reactions to release, which events deserve emotional investment. Every day you give your attention away, and whatever receives it most often will eventually shape who you become. Your peace is not stolen from you. It is traded quietly, moment by moment. The Stoic is not cold or detached. He is clear. He understands that emotions are waves and the mind is a vessel. If you let the waves decide your direction, you will drift endlessly. But if you hold the helm with awareness, you can cross even violent seas. Peace is not the absence of emotion. Peace is the refusal to be ruled by it. Most people live as if every external event carries authority over their inner state. A comment can ruin their day. A headline can steal their sleep. An opinion can shake their identity. The Stoic rule begins by questioning this silent agreement. Who granted the outside world permission to command your inner world? At what moment did you decide that chaos must be answered with chaos? This is where Stoic wisdom begins to feel uncomfortable because it removes excuses. It tells you that while you cannot control the noise of the world, you're responsible for the silence within. This responsibility is heavy at first. Yet it is also where dignity is reborn. In the next part, we will approach the core Stoic rule for peace, a principle so simple it is often misunderstood, yet so profound that once grasped, it quietly reshapes the way you see struggle, loss, and uncertainty. At the heart of Stoic philosophy lies a rule so quiet that many overlook it, yet so firm that it can hold a life together when everything else collapses. The rule is this: separate what is within your control from what is not, and give your inner consent only to the first. This is not a motivational phrase meant to comfort you. It is a discipline meant to free you. The Stoics observed that most human suffering does not come from events themselves, but from the mistaken belief that we must command what was never ours to command. When the mind reaches outward, trying to govern people, outcomes, timing, or fate, it stretches itself thin. When it returns inward, guarding judgment and intention, it becomes unshakable. Consider how often your peace depends on things that cannot promise loyalty, the behavior of others, the recognition you hope to receive, the stability of circumstances, the fairness of life. Each of these stands outside your authority, yet many live as if happiness were a fragile object placed in their hands. When it slips, they curse the world. The Stoic does something radical instead. He releases the illusion of ownership. He does not say, "This should not have happened." He asks, "What part of this belongs to me now?" In that question, panic loses its grip. Epictetus, once a slave, understood this rule intimately. His body could be chained, his status erased, his comfort removed, yet his judgments remained his own. This distinction was not philosophical luxury, it was survival. He taught that your opinions, desires, and choices are yours. Everything else is borrowed. Borrowed things can be taken back at any moment. When you forget this, fear grows roots. When you remember it, fear loosens. You stop begging reality to behave differently. You begin preparing your character to meet reality as it is. This rule does not numb you. It sharpens you. It trains the mind to pause before reacting, to examine whether an emotional impulse is responding to truth or to expectation. When insult arrives, the Stoic does not deny the sting. He denies the authority of the insult to define him. When loss occurs, he grieves without surrendering his self-command. He understands that pain may knock at the door, but suffering enters only when judgment invites it in. Many misunderstand Stoicism as passive acceptance, as quiet surrender to whatever happens. This is a shallow reading. The Stoic rule is not do nothing. It is do what is yours to do, and release the rest. Act with reason, speak with integrity, choose courage over comfort. These belong to you. Outcomes do not. Once you internalize this, action becomes cleaner. You work without desperation. You love without possession. You strive without attachment to applause. Your effort becomes sincere because it no longer demands guarantees. Chaos feeds on confusion. It thrives when the mind treats everything as equally urgent. The Stoic rule introduces hierarchy. Some things matter deeply, others merely feel loud. By filtering life through control, you reclaim energy that was wasted on resistance. You stop arguing with time, with fate, with the past. You begin to place your strength where it can actually bear fruit, in your conduct, your values, your response. This rule asks for courage because it removes a familiar refuge, blame. When you accept responsibility for your inner world, you lose the comfort of excuses. Yet what you gain is far greater, dignity. You become someone who cannot be easily shaken, not because life is gentle, but because your foundation is internal. Peace in this sense is not an emotional state. It is a structural one. In a world that constantly invites outrage, comparison, and fear, this Stoic rule stands as a quiet refusal. A refusal to let randomness dictate character. A refusal to let noise replace reason. When practiced daily, it does not make life smaller. It makes you larger than the chaos you move through. Understanding the Stoic rule is one thing. Living it under pressure is another. This is where philosophy leaves the safety of thought and enters the terrain of daily life. Chaos rarely announces itself as a grand crisis. It arrives quietly, disguised as small irritations, unmet expectations, and moments where things do not go your way. The Stoics paid close attention to these moments because they reveal whether the rule is merely admired or truly embodied. A calm mind is not proven in silence, but in disturbance. When something goes wrong, the mind reacts faster than reason. It labels the event as unfair, threatening, or personal. The Stoic practice begins with a pause. Not suppression, not denial, but a brief suspension of judgment. In that pause, you ask a simple question. Is this within my control or outside it? This question is not asked to escape responsibility, but to place it correctly. Without this step, energy scatters, anger sharpens, fear multiplies. With it, the mind regains structure. Consider how often people suffer twice, once from the event, and again from the story they tell about it. A delay becomes disrespect, a mistake becomes failure, a disagreement becomes rejection. The Stoic learns to separate facts from interpretations. Facts are neutral, interpretations are chosen. By choosing carefully, you prevent chaos from expanding beyond its actual size. What happened is one thing. What you add to it determines whether peace survives. This discipline does not remove emotion. It refines it. The Stoics never aim to become unfeeling. They aim to become free from unnecessary suffering. When frustration arises, it is observed rather than obeyed. When anxiety appears, it is examined rather than amplified. Over time, the mind learns that it does not need to respond to every internal signal, just as a seasoned sailor does not panic at every wave. A trained mind does not panic at every feeling. Practicing this rule also changes how you relate to others. You stop demanding that people act according to your expectations. You recognize that their opinions, moods, and choices belong to them. This does not make you indifferent. It makes you fair. You can listen without absorbing hostility. You can care without surrendering self-command. Relationships become clearer because they are no longer burdened with silent demands for control. One of the hardest applications of this rule appears in moments of injustice. The Stoic does not pretend injustice is acceptable. He distinguishes between what must be confronted through action and what must be endured with dignity. Rage that destroys character serves no one. Courage guided by reason can serve many. By keeping judgment intact, the Stoic remains capable of effective action rather than reactive destruction. Daily life offers endless training. Traffic, criticism, uncertainty, loss. Each becomes a rehearsal. The question is always the same, though the circumstances change. What is mine to govern here? My tone, my decision, my next step. What is not? The outcome, the approval, the timing. By answering honestly, you conserve strength. Peace emerges not as comfort, but as clarity. Over time, this practice builds an inner boundary. Events may cross into your life, but they do not automatically cross into your identity. You begin to experience a quiet confidence, not arrogance, but steadiness. The world may remain unpredictable, yet you are no longer at its mercy. This is not withdrawal from life. It is deeper participation without self-betrayal. The Stoics believed that character is shaped not by what we say in calm moments, but by what we choose in pressure. Each time you apply this rule, you strengthen that character. Each time you fail, you learn where attention is needed. There is no perfection in this path, only progress. And progress, sustained over time, becomes peace that does not depend on circumstances. There comes a point where understanding and practice must mature into reflection. Reflection is where the Stoic rule stops being a technique and becomes a way of seeing the world. At this stage, peace is no longer something you try to achieve. It is something you stop interfering with. Many people disturb their own inner balance not because life is unbearable, but because they resist what has already arrived. The Stoic learns to look directly at reality without demanding that it justify itself. Think of how often suffering begins with a single silent sentence. This should not be happening to me. That sentence feels natural, even reasonable, yet it quietly declares war on the present moment. The Stoic replaces it with a different question. Given that this is happening, who am I choosing to be? This shift does not erase pain, but it restores agency. When you stop arguing with reality, your energy returns to where it can be used. Reflection also reveals how deeply the desire for control shapes human behavior. People seek certainty in careers, relationships, identity, and future outcomes. When certainty breaks, anxiety rushes in. The Stoic does not cure anxiety by predicting the future. He cures it by loosening the demand to predict at all. He understands that life was never a contract promising stability. It is a process requiring adaptability. By reflecting on impermanence, the Stoic does not become pessimistic. He becomes prepared. In moments of loss, this perspective becomes essential. Loss exposes the truth of attachment. What you believed was permanent reveals itself as temporary. The Stoic does not shame himself for feeling grief. He examines the expectation that created the shock. He remembers that everything external was on loan. This remembrance softens despair. You still mourn, but you do not collapse. You grieve while remaining rooted in character. Reflection also deepens gratitude, though not in a sentimental way. Gratitude becomes quiet recognition rather than emotional excitement. The Stoic appreciates what is present without clinging to it. He enjoys success without confusing it with identity. He accepts praise without requiring it. This balance protects him from both arrogance and despair. When fortune rises, he remains grounded. When it falls, he remains intact. A reflective Stoic also becomes more compassionate. By understanding how little control anyone truly has, judgment softens. You see others not as obstacles, but as fellow participants in uncertainty. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it reduces hatred. You respond with firmness rather than bitterness. In doing so, you preserve your own peace while acting justly. At this level, peace is no longer reactive. It is not something that appears only when things go well. It becomes a background stability, like the depth of the ocean beneath shifting waves. Surface conditions change constantly. Depth remains. The Stoic rule reflected upon daily builds this depth. You stop measuring life by comfort and begin measuring it by alignment with values. Reflection requires honesty. It asks you to notice where you still cling, where you still demand control, where you still confuse preference with necessity. Each discovery is an opportunity, not a failure. The Stoics believed that self-examination at the end of each day was essential, not to judge harshly, but to refine judgment. What disturbed my peace today? Did I give power to something that did not deserve it? Through reflection, you begin to see chaos differently. It is no longer an enemy to defeat, but a condition to navigate. Just as a skilled walker adjusts to uneven ground, the Stoic adjusts to life without complaint. This is not resignation. It is mastery of response. Ultimately, reflection reveals a quiet truth. Peace does not come from arranging the world to your liking. It comes from arranging your values so they cannot be easily threatened. When your sense of worth rests in character rather than circumstance, chaos loses its ability to dominate you. You move through the world alert, engaged, and inwardly free. Stoic wisdom was never meant to remain abstract. It was designed to be lived, tested, and applied in ordinary moments where pressure quietly accumulates. The rule for peace becomes real only when it shapes daily behavior. Without action, understanding fades. Without repetition, clarity weakens. The Stoics emphasize small, consistent practices because character is not built in dramatic decisions, but in habits repeated when no one is watching. Begin the day by setting an inner boundary. Before the world speaks to you, remind yourself of what belongs to you. Your judgments, your intentions, your effort. Everything else will arrive without asking permission. This morning reflection prepares the mind to receive events without surrendering authority. When difficulties appear, they no longer feel like ambushes. They feel like expected visitors. Throughout the day, practice deliberate pauses. When emotion rises, do not rush to express it. Delay creates space, and space restores choice. A few seconds of restraint can prevent hours of regret. Ask quietly, is this reaction aligned with my values, or am I responding out of habit? This question transforms impulse into instruction. Over time, reactions slow and awareness sharpens. Another essential practice is voluntary discomfort. The Stoics occasionally chose inconvenience to remind themselves that comfort is not a requirement for peace. Skipping a luxury, accepting minor hardship, or resisting immediate gratification trains resilience. When difficulty arrives uninvited, it no longer feels unbearable. You have already rehearsed endurance. This practice is not about self-punishment. It is about independence from comfort. Speech also becomes a field of practice. Words reveal inner order. Speak less, but speak deliberately. Complaints often signal a desire to control what cannot be controlled. By reducing unnecessary complaint, you reduce inner conflict. Silence, when chosen wisely, preserves dignity. When you do speak, aim for honesty without aggression, clarity without cruelty. Evening reflection completes the cycle. At the end of the day, review without judgment. Where did I maintain self-command? Where did I surrender it unnecessarily? This is not an exercise in guilt, but in calibration. Each day becomes a lesson. Over time, mistakes become teachers rather than burdens. Apply the rule, especially in relationships. Release the demand that others meet your expectations. Offer respect without requiring validation. Care deeply, but without possession. When disappointment occurs, return to the distinction between preference and necessity. You may prefer understanding, appreciation, or agreement. You do not require them to remain at peace. This shift protects relationships from resentment. Work, too, becomes lighter under this rule. Focus on the quality of effort rather than the certainty of outcome. Do your work as an expression of character, not as a transaction for approval. Success becomes a result, not a condition for self-worth. Failure becomes feedback, not a verdict. Practicing stoicism in this way does not remove struggle, it refines it. Struggle becomes meaningful rather than chaotic. You stop fighting life and start cooperating with reality. This cooperation is not submission, it is strategic alignment. With repetition, These practices begin to merge into identity. You no longer need to remind yourself constantly. Responses emerge naturally from training. Peace becomes durable because it is practiced, not hoped for. The Stoics understood that peace is not something you find once and keep forever. It is something you renew through disciplined living. Each day offers the same invitation to govern what is yours and to release what is not. In the end, the Stoic rule for peace does not offer escape from a chaotic world. It offers orientation within it. Chaos continues, uncertainty remains, loss, change, and noise do not disappear. What changes is the position from which you meet them. You no longer stand exposed, asking life to be gentle. You stand grounded, prepared to respond with clarity rather than fear. This is the quiet power the Stoics sought, not dominance over events, but sovereignty over the self. Peace, from this perspective, is not a mood that comes and goes. It is a posture. It is the decision to anchor your worth in what cannot be taken, your character, your judgment, your chosen values. When these become your reference point, the world loses its ability to destabilize you completely. Events may disturb the surface of your life, but they no longer overturn its foundation. The Stoics understood that human life is fragile by design. Time erodes everything external. Bodies weaken, reputations fade, circumstances reverse. To build peace on anything temporary is to build on sand. This is why Stoic peace feels firm rather than euphoric. It does not depend on constant reassurance. It survives disappointment. It endures change. As you walk this path, you may notice something subtle. The desire to control others softens. The urge to prove yourself diminishes. You stop measuring your life by comparison. Instead, you measure it by consistency. Consistency between what you value and how you act. This alignment creates a quiet confidence that does not need applause. The world often teaches the opposite lesson. It tells you that peace comes from winning arguments, securing outcomes, and avoiding discomfort. Stoicism counters this gently but firmly. It teaches that peace comes from restraint, clarity, and acceptance of limits. Limits once accepted stop feeling like cages. They become boundaries that protect your energy. There will still be moments when emotion overwhelms you. Stoicism never promised perfection. In those moments, the rule remains available. Return to it without self-judgment. Ask again what is yours to govern. Release what is not. Peace is not lost by falling. It is lost by refusing to rise with awareness. Over time, living this way reshapes your relationship with chaos itself. Chaos no longer feels personal. It becomes part of the terrain of existence. You move through it with steadier steps. You stop asking why life is difficult and start asking how to meet difficulty well. This shift changes everything. The Stoic rule for peace is simple, but not easy. It requires daily attention, yet its reward is profound. You gain an inner freedom that cannot be granted or revoked by the world. You become someone who can remain humane without being fragile, engaged without being consumed, calm without being detached. In a world that constantly pulls the mind outward, Stoicism invites it home, not to hide, but to govern. From that place of inner order, you participate in life more fully, not less. You speak with intention. You act with courage. You endure with dignity. This is not the peace of withdrawal. It is the peace of presence, a peace that walks with you through uncertainty rather than waiting on the other side of it. When you live by this rule, chaos does not disappear, but it no longer decides who you are.